In July of 2026, Tony Romo made headlines across the sports world when he was pulled over on the Milwaukee freeway and arrested on suspicion of an alleged DUI.
Speaking on the speaker back there?
I was.
And just like that, the whole country was talking about him again, but for all the wrong reasons.
Tony Romo.
Tony Romo.
I want to ask you about somebody who I know means a lot to you, Tony Romo.
But what most people don't know is that long before this, millions of those same fans had already turned on him once, all because of a single play. But what was that play? Why did it turn an entire city against the guy they loved? And what if the truth behind it is nothing like the story you've been told? To understand all of it, we have to go back to one cold night in Seattle. In January of 2007, a football slipped through Tony Romo's hands and an entire city turned on him in about 1 second. It was a playoff game. All he had to do was catch a snap and set it down so his kicker could win it. He'd done it 1,000 times, and yet this time he dropped it. From that night on, millions of fans called him a choke artist, the guy who couldn't win the big game. That one play followed him for the rest of his life.
There's tough moments. I think every season that you don't win the Super Bowl, it's never a good feeling. And so you're always striving to never have that feeling again, and that's why you work as hard as you do.
But what the cameras never showed you is one strange thing about that night, one detail that says it might not have been his fault after all. So why did a whole fan base turn on him? And why did the man who dropped that ball refuse to blame anyone but himself? To understand, you have to go back to a small town in Wisconsin, a place where almost nobody believed Tony Romo would ever play at all. You see, Tony grew up in Burlington, Wisconsin, a small town most scouts had never even heard of. His family came from almost nothing. His grandfather crossed the border from a little town in Mexico as a teenager with barely $1 to his name. But he built a life from scratch and always said the same thing. This is still the country of opportunity, and Tony, he said, was the proof. So Tony's dad served in the Navy, and then he worked construction, swinging the hammer to feed his family. His mom rang up groceries at the local store, and they didn't really have that much.
There was a point where he was earning $500 a month. How tight growing up at various points were finances?
I mean, for me, I didn't know anything different. I could have a shirt on and a ball and be fine for a week.
But they did give Tony one rule that stuck. You don't make excuses and you do the work. The only problem was that nobody in Burlington was getting discovered. The high school was tiny, the scouts didn't come. If you wanted out, you had to be so good that they couldn't ignore you. And here's the thing, Tony was that good. He just wasn't good at the sport that you would think. So before he was a quarterback, football was the sport that Tony was the worst at. You see, a lot of people didn't know that basketball was his real gift. He set his school's all-time scoring record, and he made the all-state team in basketball higher than any honor he ever earned in football. One player who later won a pro title said Tony could have gone pro in basketball. Football almost didn't even happen at all. He broke his finger and missed a whole entire season. He started his junior year as the third string quarterback. Think about that for a second, third string. The guy who never plays. Then one game, the coach had no choice but to put him in. And then Tony threw for 300 yards, but trip out on this. He had barely played real football in his life. He just walked on and did it. He even picked his jersey number 9 from a movie about a baseball natural who saw the game in slow motion because that's how football felt to him. But being a natural in a town that nobody watched meant one thing, that nobody was coming to give you a chance. When it was time for college, not a single big program offered Tony a scholarship. Not one. The only interest came from tiny schools most people have never heard of. His talent was real, but nobody with power had ever seen it. Then came the strangest break of his entire life. A college coach named Roy Whitkey grew up near Burlington. His parents still lived there. They cut out a small story from the local paper about this kid, Tony Romo, and mailed it to their son. Whitkey couldn't make it to a football game, so he went and watched Tony play basketball instead, and he offered him a partial scholarship to Eastern Illinois, a small school, but at least it was a chance. Even then, the coaches weren't sure. They thought about moving him off quarterback. They said he was raw and didn't even know how to practice, so Tony decided to practice more than anyone on that field. He would say that he threw the ball 6 days a week for hours all year long. And slowly, the kid nobody wanted became the best player in the building. By the time Tony was done at Eastern Illinois, he wasn't just good, he was the best. For 3 years straight, he was the top player in his league. He set records for passing yards and touchdowns. And in his final year, he won the Walter Payton Award given to the best player at his level of college football. He was the first player from his whole conference to ever win it. Think about that. The kid no big school won it was now the best in the country at his level. The problem was his level wasn't the top level, and the men who run the NFL barely knew his name. So when the biggest night of his life arrived, Tony Romo sat by the phone and waited to hear it called. Every year, the NFL draft is where dreams come true. Team after team calls the names of the best college players in America. Tony sat through the entire draft, every round, and he heard his name called 0 times. Nobody drafted him, not a single team. When it was finally over, a few teams did call, however, to offer him a tryout, and 2 of them wanted him pretty bad. The Denver Broncos offered him a signing bonus of about $20,000, and the Dallas Cowboys offered him about $10,000. But here's the strange part. Both of those teams had a coach who came from Tony's same tiny college. Denver's head coach Mike Shanahan went there, and so did a Dallas assistant named Sean Payton. 2 men from the same small school, both fighting over the same undrafted kid. And for some reason, Tony decided to take the smaller check. He turned down double the money and bet on Sean Payton and the team that truly believed in him. So he fought his whole life to get here, and he arrived as the lowest man on the entire roster. And now he had to survive. For his first few years in Dallas, Tony Romo was a nobody all over again. He didn't play, he held a clipboard on the sideline. His only real job on game day was to kneel down and hold the ball for the kicker, catch the snap, set it down, and let someone else score. In 2004, he almost got cut completely. He was that close to being cut out of the league before he ever threw a single pass that mattered. But he kept doing the same thing he'd always done. He outworked everyone and waited for a door to open. Then, in the middle of the 2006 season, in one single halftime, that door blew wide open. Dallas was struggling, so at halftime of a game, the coaches benched their veteran starter, Drew Bledsoe, a former #1 overall pick, and handed the whole team to Tony Romo, the undrafted holder, the kid from the town that nobody scouted. And he ran with it. By the time he was done, Tony Romo had set the Dallas Cowboys record for passing yards and touchdowns, more than Roger Staubach, more than Troy Aikman, 2 of the most famous quarterbacks who ever lived, both with championship rings. Tony had passed them both. He threw for over 34,000 yards, he made 4 Pro Bowls, and in 2014 he was the best quarterback in the entire league that whole year. He had climbed from the very bottom to the very top. And that climb is exactly why the fall will hurt so much more. Go back to that playoff game in Seattle. It was the first playoff start of Tony's life. For most of the night, he was the reason Dallas had a chance. Late in the game, his team was down by 1. Tony drove them all the way down to the 2-yard line. All they needed was a short, easy field goal to win. So Tony knelt down to do the simplest part of his job, hold the ball. The snap came back perfect and it slipped right through his fingers. He grabbed it off the grass and ran, trying to save the season by himself, but the defender dragged him down 2 yards short and Dallas lost. The cameras found Tony on the bench with his head down and both hands gripping his helmet. He'd actually played a good game that night too, but it really didn't matter. In that moment, he became the choke artist. His own head coach was so crushed, he quit soon after. And Tony? He didn't hide. Here's what he said. "It hurts really bad right now. I cost the Dallas Cowboys a playoff win. I don't know if I've ever felt this low." But here's what the highlight reels never even showed you. And that's that the ball might have actually been the problem. Here's what a lot of people don't know. A brand new football is slippery. Teams rub them down before games so that they're easier to grip. But right after the loss, Cowboys owner Jerry Jones said the ball Tony dropped was brand new and had not been rubbed down the right way. And he wasn't the only one who noticed that. Watching live that night, broadcasters John Madden and Mike Ditka both pointed out that the ball looked shiny. Nobody was making excuses for Tony yet, but observations. The Cowboys' long snapper, LP Ladouceur, the last man to touch that ball before Tony, said years later that it was obvious the ball had been swapped for a shiny one. And Tony admitted himself, he said the reason it slipped was the ball was slick. But then, in the very same breath, he took it all back on himself and he said, "You know what? It really doesn't matter. You still have to catch it." Whether it was true the ball was slippery or not, in the end, Tony Romo took full responsibility regardless. Now, a lot of people say Tony's drop actually changed an NFL rule. And guess what? That part is true, just not the way you think about it. You see, those slick kicking balls had a name, the K-ball. They came straight out of the box, shiny and stiff, and for years, the kickers and holders around the league had begged the NFL to let them break the balls in first. The league didn't listen, not until Tony dropped that snap on the biggest stage in football. Right after that season, the NFL changed the rule and gave teams time before the game to rub the kicking balls down and break them in. And field goals got better almost immediately. Think about that. The play that ruined Tony Romo's reputation is the same play that fixed a problem that every kicker in the league had been complaining about for 8 years. He might have took the blame, and everyone who came after him might have benefited when they decided to change things because of it. Here's what that one play in Seattle really did. It made Tony the guy you could blame for everything. A year later, before another big playoff game, Tony took a short trip during his week off. He went to Cabo in Mexico with his girlfriend at the time, the singer Jessica Simpson. 2 of his own teammates went on that same trip, but when the Cowboys lost their next game, the whole country pointed at one man, Tony. They said that he was too busy having fun to take football seriously. Even Cowboys legend Troy Aikman went on TV and said it. You don't go to Cabo the week before a playoff game, you just don't do it. But listen to what Aikman said right after. He admitted the trip didn't hurt Tony's preparation one bit. In other words, even the guy criticizing him didn't think it actually cost them the game. So even though the vacation didn't cost them the game, it didn't matter. The media already decided who the bad guy was. And no matter how great he played after that, it never changed. For years, Tony carried the label while quietly being one of the best in the game. But then, his body started to give out. In 2016, a serious back injury cost him his job. A young rookie stepped in and played too well to sit down. So Tony, the team's all-time leader, the guy who'd earned that spot the hardest way there is, walked up to a microphone and gave the job away with class. He called it soul-crushing, and then he said that the rookie had earned the right to be the quarterback. As hard as it was to say, he had earned it. And when he got to that podium, he could have made it all about himself. But once again, he took it like a man and put the team first. Years later, that same young quarterback would even pass Tony Romo's all-time Cowboys record for passing yards. The kid who took his job took his record too. And that kid is known as Dak Prescott. But through all of it, Tony never once complained. His playing days were over, but his story wasn't. So when Tony retired, he walked straight into a TV booth to talk about football, and he was great at it almost immediately. Fans loved him. They gave him a nickname, Romo-Stradamus, part Romo, part Nostradamus, the famous fortune teller. Because Tony could look at a play before the ball was even snapped and tell you exactly what was about to happen, and he'd be right.
He's trying to get him to draw offsides. He didn't even call a play in the huddle.
3rd and 6. And there you go, Tony.
Quarterback's going to roll right and launch the ball out of bounds. It's going to look weird.
Rolling right, launching out of bounds, and Tony stealing the signals once again.
One game, he called the final score in the first quarter, 24-20. He nailed it. Defensive coaches around the league joked about wearing an earpiece just to hear what Tony saw coming. Nobody had ever gone straight from the field to the top booth and been this good this fast. CBS even handed him a 10-year deal worth $180 million. And in 2021, they put him in the College Football Hall of Fame. The kid that nobody drafted had become one of the most loved voices in sports commentary. And that should be where the story ends. But life doesn't always work that way. So go back one more time to that cold night in Seattle, 1 snap, 1 second. That's the moment millions of people decided who Tony Romo was, but it was actually never his whole story. You see, no matter what life threw at him, he always said the same thing. It doesn't matter, you still have to catch it. So who is Tony Romo? 4-time Pro Bowler, he was the Cowboys' all-time leader in passing touchdowns, a College Football Hall of Famer, and a voice that millions tune in for every Sunday. But most importantly, he was a Dallas Cowboy. Tony Romo, number 9, a Dallas Cowboy forever. And with that, I'm out. Peace.